What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. Finally, the USMNT national team has a victory, beginning the Gold Cup with a destruction of Trinidad and Tobago. The first thing to note here is the USMNT national team did what it was supposed to do. How much credit you want to actually give this team for that? Up to you. The reality is, though, they generally have not been doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in this game, they did. That is a step in the right direction. Does it mean anything in terms of their chances of winning this competition? And anything in terms of projecting toward the World Cup next summer? Absolutely not. No, this is a game against Trinidad and Tobago played by your B team. The one takeaway I did want to note that might mean something potentially, or at least is a good sign, is that your creative players on this team, that position that the U.S. really has struggled to fill, showed up in this game. They had not particularly done well in the two friendlies before it. Obviously, that's against much better opposition. The fact that they did against Trinidad and Tobago doesn't say much about their chances of doing it against a Mexico, against a Canada, or making the World Cup squad, or doing it in the World Cup next summer. But to me, the person with the most on the line in this tournament, maybe outside of Matt Turner, is Malik Tillman. And Malik Tillman was good in this game. Malik Tillman got goals. Malik Tillman made things happen. Diego Luna, very good in this game. Created opportunities. Got himself a goal. The complaint about this team has been that you don't see the intensity, the effort, these accusations, which I do not frame it this way because I think it is inaccurate and unfair, but that they don't care. Running after a ball that's going back to a goalkeeper when you really had no need to do so is a high level of intensity and a demonstration of how much Diego Luna cares. And he was gifted a goal because the ball actually went back to the keeper, even though he was right there to cut off that pass. And yes, it's easier to do that when the game's going really well, when you're feeling fantastic, and everything's going your way. But he still made the defensive play to go cut off the passing lane, and the ball came to him, and he ultimately got rewarded with a goal. Jack McGlynn, some good moments in this game. Not the finished product. I've talked about him before. I'm not going to get into that again. But these guys who are supposed to provide creativity, right? This team is looking for, assuming Gio Reyna is going to be there next summer, which is not a guarantee by any means. But assuming he's one of your pieces, you need somebody else, even if it's just coming off the bench, to provide some kind of spark, some kind of number 10-esque quality. And Malik Tillman has been supposed to be that guy because he's doing that for PSV at the club level. And it just hasn't translated to the U.S. men's national team. He got off to a really good start in this game, and that is something. Same goes for Patrick Agyemang. Could he have finished a little bit better? Sure. But you saw the off-the-ball stuff that he offers. You saw the problems that he can cause, the runs that he makes. There were really good moments from a lot of the players who have been disappointing so far through those two friendlies. Again, the competition level has something to do with that. It's not time to rewrite the narrative and say all these guys are fantastic and they're all going to start the World Cup and these are the best options the U.S. has. No. But you got to take something away here. And to me, that is just simply acknowledging that a lot of the frustrations, the criticism, the issues this particular group of players at the Gold Cup have had in these two games, you saw significant improvements. That means something. Probably not very much, ultimately, but it is something, and I wanted to at least give the players credit for that because they've been taking a lot of heat. They do deserve some applause for stepping up and doing what they're supposed to. I mean, this game could have ended 7-0. This was a really good performance that this team needed You need to get off to a good start. You need to quiet some of the noise. Of course, this doesn't undo everything. It doesn't ease any of the concerns. But this is the first game you had in the tournament. It was a competitive game. You had to go take care of business, preferably in dominant fashion, and that is exactly what this team did. Now, the bigger story here, with the larger implications, that I do want to touch on for a minute before I get into a couple Club World Cup things, is what's going on with Mauricio Pochettino and Christian Pulisic. Midweek, Pulisic gives the interview. Then Pochettino is coming out talking about how nobody's bigger than the team. This is one group. It's a we, not an I. And there is clearly tension, we'll say, that's probably on the conservative side of things, between these two. Pulisic doesn't understand why he wasn't allowed to just play the friendlies. It's also fair to wonder why, if he's going to play just some of the games, he didn't sit the friendlies out, join the Gold Cup roster, and then not play until the knockout stage. But Pochettino wanted people there the whole time. There's at least some validity to that. They're clearly not seeing eye to eye. And then at the same time, as this is all going on, during the losing streak, you have the interview with Fox run, in which Pochettino says his expectation is to win the World Cup next summer. As this program is at its lowest point since failing to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. I don't think that's in question. Because it started with Copa America and it has just gotten worse. This is the moment he chose to say that. And I know he said similar things in the past. It's not like this is a completely new thing. But he didn't have to re-emphasize it. He didn't have to state it that way. My larger point with all this, and really the only thing I want to get to here, because there are a bunch of bits and pieces you can unpack, and a lot of it is just the continuation of the discussions that I've been having on this channel and that everybody invested in following this team has been having since the initial rosters were released and Pulisic wasn't on them, and it was clear he was just not going to participate this summer. But all of these little things, or bigger things, these different elements, the fact that you have a B squad and that most of your key players decided for one reason or another, either they didn't want to play, or they're injured, or they have club commitments at the Club World Cup, right? It's a combination of all of these things. You got that part of it. The Pulisic interview, Pochettino's response, the whole thing. All it is doing is elevating the expectations and the pressure for next summer. Because there has been so much pushback in the way that everybody has behaved and what people have said to this idea that this team is in trouble, that there are issues, that this is not okay, and that there is reason to be concerned about what next summer is going to look like. That is the consensus narrative outside the program. Right? Everybody has their own individual thoughts or levels of concern and degrees of frustration and all of that. But you don't hear anybody from the outside saying, oh, this is fine. I'm okay with how things are going. This bodes well for next summer. But when you don't bring your key players in, when your key players don't want to be there for this tournament to try and put things right, when U.S. Soccer is okay with key players not being here to try and put this right, when Pochettino would rather have a team there from start to finish than bring in players he knows are going to be at the World Cup next summer, assuming they're healthy. When Pulisic does this interview and talks in a way that makes sense, because his thought process is valid. He probably is really tired, and of course he could use the time off. The same thing can also be true for all of these players, and is true for all of these players at the Club World Cup who don't have that option. Right? There are varying opinions on that. I don't want to get into that conversation again. But the point of, I think, where I've kind of fallen on all of this, and the point I keep coming back to, is it's not about defending the decisions as much as it is about explaining why this is the best decision within the context of the World Cup coming next summer. Because Pulisic was trying to push back on it's ridiculous that people don't think we care, and the criticism that he's getting from some of the legends of this team from the past, and the fact that he always shows up, all of this stuff. But what he didn't address, and what Pochettino has not addressed, and what the Federation doesn't seem to really care about based on what they're allowing to happen this summer and the way their coach is talking, is the build-up and preparation to the World Cup. The messaging is, none of this is really that important. We're going to be fine. And so, why should everybody else care about it if the people who are actually involved in it don't seem to care? And obviously, the players who are there care. Pochettino cares. I'm not saying they literally don't care about this, but you get my point, right? That's the whole issue with this. Is that the messaging is the Gold Cup is not actually a priority. Trying to get some kind of confidence and consistency and a string of wins with this team is not the priority. It's making sure our guys are healthy for next summer. That is the gap, I feel like, between the people who care about this team, follow this team, support this team, and the Federation right now, that nobody has been able to bridge, is why are we okay with handling our pre-World Cup preparation this way? Because it's not, to me, it's not about this idea of, oh, these players are soft or don't care because they want some rest. I take exception to the idea that Christian Pulisic doesn't care. To me, that is completely, I agree with him when this idea of it's out of line. He has sacrificed so much for this team. And he has been there so many times for this team. But the optics of it are very different when the team is playing this poorly, when you have a new manager who you don't seem to get along with, and you have one set of competitive games left to try and reestablish dominance in this region and to try and get some good vibes going before the World Cup, and not just within the team, but within the country, to get people actually excited and people to care and people to believe in this team. Right? Because one of the things Pulisic said in that interview was, just trust us, basically. And everybody on the outside is looking around saying, why? There is a 2-year track record that you shouldn't be trusted, and that nothing is different, and that next summer is going to repeat what we saw at the Copa America and what we saw at the Nations League. And nobody has been able to explain why this is going to be different, because the opportunity to change that narrative was this summer, and everybody decided they didn't need to do anything about that. To me, that is the ultimate frustration and the disconnect here, that nobody seems to be able to explain in a way that satisfies people, because I don't think there is an explanation. And so ultimately what that does is that creates a situation where this team, this manager, these players have to deliver next summer, because they are telling you, don't focus on any of this stuff beforehand. Just let us get there. We'll take care of it. And there's a lot of skepticism for good reason that they're going to be able to do that. Now, if they do it, you got to give them credit. But they don't have another option at this point, because the pressure is not coming from the outside. The expectations are real low right now for this team from the outside, because they're not playing well and everybody's frustrated with them. They are voluntarily raising the stakes. Now you got to go live up to it. So we'll see how the rest of the Gold Cup goes, but U.S. men's national team off to a good start. Better than a bad start doesn't really mean anything long term. So There's just only so much you can take away from a game against Trinidad and Tobago, but when you have to play Trinidad and Tobago, you want it to go the way it did. Very, very good performance. Very comfortable, very confident. Finally get back in the win column. Real quickly, the Club World Cup also got underway. Still trying to decipher exactly what this is, what it's going to look like, what it means, all of those things. It is noteworthy that there have been some hiccups along the way. However, you have seen some big attendance numbers. Inter Miami game got 60,000. Really, really good showing for the PSG Atletico Madrid game as well. Bayern Munich Auckland City, not so much. And I think that is ultimately where this tournament is going to fall, which is one of my early takeaways, is it is somewhere between the pinnacle of the sport that Gianni Infantino is trying to make it out to be and a complete sham that nobody is going to take seriously, which kind of felt like more the direction that most people thought it was going to be and kind of had the vibe going in part because, they didn't have a TV deal forever and LAFC just got in a couple weeks ago and you've got the MLS pay discrepancy situation and all of these different things that are, right? This was not planned and executed very well. However, it does seem to be, for better or worse, it seems to be going okay so far. There are going to be a lot more games like Bayern Auckland City because you've got some really good teams that are actually playing their players, and you got some really bad teams that have no business being on the field with them. But that's kind of the point of this competition, to see who can give those teams the opportunity to go play with the big boys. And PSG are continuing to make their case for the best team in the world. I think they've pretty much got that wrapped up, unless this tournament is a complete disaster. And even then, I'm kind of inclined to disregard this tournament in totality, but we'll see how things play out. There just isn't much to take away from the group stage yet, and I'm hesitant to take that much away from this at all because I'm quite honestly just not a fan of it. But it's here, so we're going to try and make the most of it. I'm going to cover it, and there have been some positives so far. It hasn't been perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it hasn't been a total disaster either. And the first time trying this, that's probably a pretty good place to be. You've got to be pleased if you're FIFA so far. See if that continues. See what the rest of this looks like as different teams start playing each other and how competitive it is. How many times you see a starting 11 caliber team out there for the big clubs. But it's underway. So far, if you gotta describe it, I would say pleasantly surprising. Maybe not necessarily for me personally, but overall in terms of how it is going. If you're just objectively viewing it, it's a thing that's happening. So far, I feel like so good. Let's see how the rest of it goes. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.